Hello, I'm Amanda Williams, bringing you this secret Truro podcast in collaboration with Volunteer Cornwall. We've come together to bring you regular updates about how you can help others or help yourself. Even if you're self-isolating, there are different ways you can volunteer and help your community. This podcast is for you, and we hope you find it helpful. Hi, so glad you could join us. We're hoping to bring you this regular podcast regarding coronavirus in Cornwall. And I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Ali Bowser from Volunteer Cornwall. Hi, Ali.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm all right. I think it was a remarkably upbeat high, considering the world is crashing down around us. It's all good. It's very crazy here today at Volunteer Cornwall.
I guess you're really busy.
Yeah, it's going mad.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Lots of people ringing up for help and people ringing up to offer help. So we really have created a coronavirus response centre here.
That's great, isn't it? Just sort of, I heard you've been overwhelmed with people contacting you, which is amazing. And it's sad it has to be that way, isn't it, really? But what a great response from people in Cornwall.
Yeah, and to begin with, so last week when we first launched this, we were mainly getting calls from people who were asking to be volunteers themselves. So we were taking lots of numbers and names, and we created a database which is being kind of added to as the week's gone on. And then since the weekend, clearly things have stepped up. We've come back into the office yesterday morning with a deluge of people ringing us now to say, I need help. In particular, kind of classic call is from someone either up country or in another part of Cornwall, worried about relatives that are on their own. And actually today I've noticed more people reporting symptoms of COVID.
Really? That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
I know something certainly we're concerned about as a family down here, because we've got a family in Bedfordshire and we're a little bit concerned about how are they going to get on. So I can understand people calling you. That's great that they've got that point of contact. Let's just take a step back for a moment. So Ali, tell us about yourself and about Volunteer Cornwall.
Okay, so my job role at Volunteer Cornwall is a health and wellbeing volunteering officer. And the idea is, when I came into post about 15, 16 months ago now, was to get more people volunteering right across the county. So whilst that sounds very noble and easy to achieve, it was quite difficult, quite challenging, because what's interesting I found over this last 15 months is that people have a very rigid idea of what volunteering is.
Okay.
And often, so if I were to ask you, Amanda, okay, right, think about volunteering, what comes into your mind? What's the first thing that springs into your mind?
I tell you what, the first thing that springs into my mind is when I worked at hospital years ago, is the WRVS and the cup of tea shop where I used to go and get a marathon. They're not called marathons anymore, are they?
No, Snickers now.
Snickers, but so that's what comes into my mind. And I know my mother-in-law does an awful lot of volunteering in her village in Bedfordshire with kind of old people's welfare and meals and things like that.
Yeah, so people have different ideas, and that's a classic example of one type of volunteering. Now, what I've discovered is that whatever you have in your mind as an image of volunteering, if it's a negative image, for example, if someone couldn't think of anything worse than working in a hospital because they don't like being in that environment, then what you've just described would actually give someone a negative opinion. So, overridingly, I'm finding when I ask people, okay, volunteering, what comes into your mind? They're talking about charity shops.
Okay,
Then the
right.
next question I say is, right, so does that appeal to you? And especially younger people, when I'm doing outreach work into schools and colleges, quite a few people are saying, no, I don't want to work in a charity shop. That's not my kind of thing.
Okay.
So volunteering can cover all sorts of things. So that's my challenge in this particular role, is to get people to think about volunteering in a different way.
So it's kind of educating people, really, isn't it, to see what is out there?
Yeah, and actually, there's also a lot of people who are already volunteering and don't realise that they are.
Okay.
So those who are more community spirited, those people who may help out their children's scout groups or girl guides, who may walk neighbours' dogs or who may drop medicine off for neighbours. They're the kind of things. And being neighbourly, it's almost
Yeah.
like volunteering
Yeah.
gives the wrong, for some people, it's the wrong word because
Yes.
it's bringing in the wrong connection in
It
their
does
mind.
have the connotation that you need to wear a tabard with a little logo on it,
Yes.
doesn't it? In a
Yeah.
way,
Yeah.
in a funny
Yeah.
sort of way. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And maybe it is that kind of people understanding the difference and what they can do. And maybe it's going back to how things were a little bit back in the day, really, isn't it?
Yes. It's kind of got, people have volunteered for as long as people have lived, and it is so, as time's gone on, volunteering has changed, especially with younger people in schemes such as the Duke of Edinburgh.
Yes.
Those kind of things are, classic examples of how you can, get involved with volunteering. So many people see it as a kind of tick box
Yeah.
exercise and don't necessarily carry on. But so that's what my
Yeah.
role is. And overall, Volunteer Cornwall, we're actually a little bit of a misnomer here
Okay.
because people say, "Oh, Volunteer Cornwall, oh great, we need volunteers. Can you give us a list?" And actually, we don't work like that. There's two things that we could be called alternatively that might better describe us. So one is Volunteer Projects Cornwall, and so we do run a series of projects with partners in the county, such as the NHS and the Care and Health Services, from the Cornwall Council through to Aid UK, for example. And these projects will be doing different things, such as helping to reduce loneliness or helping people who are recovering from cancer.
And
So
that
that's one
loneliness
aspect.
is particularly
Yeah.
important at the minute, isn't it? Because I
Oh,
think now
yeah.
we're all, since last night, we're all being encouraged to stay at home. And for some people, that's quite a big change in their lives, isn't it? And those of us that
Yeah.
are tech enabled, we can make do, but some people don't have that facility. And we're doing this
No.
podcast, and I recognise that some people won't be able to easily access this.
No.
And that's quite a challenge in itself, isn't it?
It is, and again, a lot of things I'm finding is, whilst that's absolutely true, a lot of people are not tech savvy. Surprisingly, the biggest uptake on Facebook are those over the age of 55.
Okay.
And so there is still a community that is able to do it. It's
Good.
just sometimes they need a little bit of extra help. So, for
Yes.
example, um, I was life and limb with my husband at the weekend to go and get my mother-in-law set up on Skype calls and WhatsApp face things, whatever you call it,
Yes.
FaceTime thing,
Yes.
so that she can see us.
Yes.
Even though, and her daughter, so my sister-in-law lives up country, so again, she's not going to be able to see her. So it's
Yeah.
just those kind of connections
It
with a
makes a
little
big
bit of help.
difference.
Yes, totally. But now, of course, it's about keeping the distance
Yeah.
physically from people.
That's right.
Those kind of things are really hard.
And when I first came across you in the last few weeks, you were putting out an appeal because of this Flu Friends campaign you'd had a few years ago. And I think this is what's informed what you're doing now with the coronavirus situation, hasn't it?
Yeah, so if you're right, a few years ago, I wasn't here then, but this was in response to the SARS flu, I think. The idea was that people who are stranded at home or self-isolating, even then, the idea was that the volunteers were able to go and collect Tamiflu. So it was about specifically collecting medication for those who might be vulnerable. And of course, that was in a day when there was, a protection for it and treatment for it. And we're not even in that situation now. So the calls that I've had today, this, for example, is a lot of it is relating to medication. One single father of two is showing signs of COVID-19, and he hasn't got any paracetamol.
Right.
And it's a very simple thing like that. I would be prepared to go over and drive a pack of paracetamol over to him.
Yeah.
And it's in these kind of cases you think, oh my goodness, it's shocking to think that there's so little paracetamol, isn't it?
Paracetamol and toilet roll. Who'd Who'd
Who'd have thought?
I know,
Although the other
incredible.
day I did hear, I just have to say, I did hear that apparently wine was the new toilet rolls and that there was a shortage of
Yes.
wine.
Oh,
So,
golly.
it's needs must and
Yeah,
everything.
that's it. Now, when we spoke the other day, you mentioned there were 5 things that people could do. So I'm
Yeah.
quite interested to hear what those 5 things are.
Well, I think the first thing, even if you are self-isolating, there's still plenty you can do. And the first thing is what we would class as the food bank support. So think food banks. I don't know what, just have interest, Amanda. When I say food banks to you, what comes into your mind?
Well, I know it's run by the Trussell Trust, and there's a great food bank up at Highertown, isn't there? And I understand also that they've been struggling because people aren't donating their extra tins to the
Yeah,
supermarket into the baskets where the tills are.
yeah,
So that's a
yeah.
real challenge for them, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So, you're spot on. That is the problem. So, even if you're self isolating, the message is yes, you can go and shop. That's fine. No one is going to close the shops. So, when you are shopping and you're going around the supermarket and you're plopping your stuff into your trolley or your basket, just put one extra thing in there every time
Yeah.
you shop.
Okay, so
Just one extra thing.
that's a really easy, achievable one to do, isn't it, for all of us?
Yeah, any of us can do that,
Yeah.
and it doesn't cost much at all. I mean, I put in a big box of cereal the other day. That was only a couple of quid.
Yeah.
But that could be the difference between a family having breakfast for a week.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And now also on the food banks, they're also short of people to help because predominantly they've been relying on people over 70.
Right, of course, yes.
So, and I'll also flag up at this stage is that as far as the government announcement, which happened yesterday about the more severe clampdown,
Yeah. So
being able to support
just to be sure, that's yesterday, which is
23rd, wasn't it?
Monday. I can't even remember what the date is
I think it
now.
was the 23rd. Yes, it was the 23rd
Yes.
of March. Yes.
Yeah.
So Monday the 23rd of March, and obviously this is a changing landscape.
Yes, indeed.
But that announcement did also exclude. So you are allowed out if you are helping vulnerable members of society.
Yeah.
So what the food banks need is still to have some people come forward,
Okay.
and you can contact the Trussell Trust, and also just check online. There are a few other food banks not run by them that you can be in contact with, and then if you ring them, they'll tell you what their particular coordination and what their efforts are during this time. But please don't think, just because it's a food bank and that you're not allowed out that you can't help.
Yeah.
Because you
Okay.
can.
So that's a
the
really
first one.
good. That's a great, really achievable number one. A tin or something dried in the supermarket basket, and if you can help at food bank, get in touch with them. That's brilliant. Lovely.
Yeah, if every person who shopped, even if excluding shopping for the vulnerable, even excluding that, if each person shopping was able to spare one item, then that you can imagine
That's
just
huge.
how
That's
fantastic that
massive.
would be.
Yeah.
I was really pleased to see at the end of last week, that the food bank box in the Tesco's was really quite full.
That's good.
So I'm really encouraged about that. But just keep putting it in.
Brilliant. Lovely. So that's great number one. What's number two, Ali?
Oh, right. Okay. Now, this is going to be a good test of my memory because I don't have anything written down in front of me. That's my fault.
Well, we can stretch it over a few episodes if you like.
Fine.
But that's a really good number one take home. Food banks.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, especially as we have it in our minds or we can't leave the house.
Yes.
But this does actually leap on quite nicely to the number two.
Okay.
Now, number two is about a telephone befriender.
Right.
We can go back to that old-fashioned thing called a telephone and pick it up and chat to people. And one of the most important things, when you mentioned earlier about isolation, the thing that can help reduce isolation is someone feeling that they are important. And I think that's a kind of fundamental human thing, isn't it? we don't want to be forgotten.
Yeah.
And of course, if you are elderly and you're lucky to have relatives, you will get calls from them. But what is nice is to have calls from people that you may not know, just to have a chat about and offloading and sharing even concerns or worries, or having a bit of a laugh, and just to take your mind off things for a few minutes.
Yeah.
And that kind of connection with some people really will be a lifeline.
Because that can really help with the anxiety as well, isn't it? If you're occupied with something else rather than worrying about something,
Yeah,
it makes the day go a little bit quicker, and it does take your mind off it, doesn't it?
absolutely.
So if they want to do that, can they get hold of you, and can you put them in touch with people, or how does that work, Ali?
Right. So at the moment, Volunteer Cornwall are setting up. I think we're setting up something dedicated and separate to our existing volunteer system, which will allow people to, kind of sign up to that service.
Okay.
One of the things we are very conscious of at Volunteer Cornwall is the need to have some inbuilt supervision for people who are making calls.
Yes.
What you have to do is to look after people's mental health when they are themselves potentially going to be talking to people who could be very distressed or
Yes.
anxious. And of course, one of the things what we don't want is we don't want people ringing up and making it worse for the
That's
person
very
that they're
true.
talking
Yes.
to. And
That's
it is
very
really
true.
easy. And again, we're dealing with human behaviour.
Yeah.
We're dealing with, sometimes it's all doom and gloom, and maybe, the person who wants to ring up someone ends up going into a bit of a negative spiral with them. And what we want to make sure we've got good guidance, good guidelines, so that people have a very strong idea of the reasons that they're doing it.
And the boundaries, maybe. The boundaries, things they can talk about, and maybe things they can avoid, or so that I think that's very wise, actually, to have really good guidance, because sometimes people can help, and with the best will in the world, it can go a little kind of skewy sometimes, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Totally,
So that's a great number 2. So if people want to receive a phone call from you, they can get in touch to be part of a list. And if people want to give those phone calls, they can also get in touch with you. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's number 2.
Right. So luckily I've been able to remember the third one.
Well done. What's number 3?
Number 3 is the health and care system is under such immense strain, it's almost collapsing. Maybe that's just me being a bit dramatic, but hey, it is under
it's unprecedented,
strain.
isn't it?
Absolutely. And of course, we need to remember those people who are being cared for in their own homes, or who are residents of care homes. And they really are very, very vulnerable, because it's not even as if they can cook themselves a meal or take care of themselves or get themselves out of bed safely. They may be at risk of falls. They may need someone to supervise their medication, for example. And so these are truly the most vulnerable in society. And what we're concerned at is the possibility of the carers who'd normally go in to look after them themselves becoming ill.
Yeah, that is
then,
a worry.
Or having to self-isolate because they have people at home who are ill, showing the symptoms. So it is only logical that there's going to be a matter of time before this really takes so much stress. So what we're doing to try to help the health and care service in that area is to be able to reach out to those people who may have experience of being a carer. Now, that could be someone who is used to giving personal care, who is used to dressing wounds, for example, rubbing oil in swollen joints, being able to help someone clean their teeth, etc. And ideally, it's someone who's been in a care profession or may have been a health professional themselves and is retired. And we've actually got there's been quite a lot of student nurses who've been laid off from university, and are able to offer their time. But of course, as things change, as the landscape change, of course, we don't know how it will be from day to day. But
yes, I think that's the challenging thing, isn't it? It seems to change every day at the moment, and it must be hard to plan for that. But I think that sounds like a really good number 3, doesn't it? Having people that have got that experience that can volunteer and help those people that really need it. Okay.
Yeah, and that's really quite specialised volunteering,
Okay.
and we are going to be happy to take people directly who want to be able to do that with that kind of background and experience.
Okay.
Only 2 weeks ago, we were getting messages on our Facebook saying, well, I hope they're not replacing the carers that people should have, because, that's just a free way of doing it. Well, actually, it's unprecedented, as you say, and we have to provide, basic essentials.
It's kind of all hands on deck, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it is, absolutely.
Yeah, that's it. So those 3 are fantastic starts, aren't they? What we're going to do, Ali, we're going to just leave 4 and 5 until the next time, because I think there's so much to say, isn't there? And as we were saying, it's a constantly changing landscape. Let's see what happens tonight with the announcements from the government. So just tell me, if people have heard something just now, then they want to respond to that, what should they do?
Okay, so there's a few things. First of all, check out our website. We're putting updates on that as and when they come up with links.
Okay. Can you just tell us what that is?
Absolutely. It's Volunteer Cornwall.
Okay.
.org.uk.
Right.
And in fact, if you just put Volunteer Cornwall in, if you ask Mrs. Google, she will give you the Volunteer Cornwall.
Google knows.
And it will come straight. Google knows.
Google knows everything.
I used to work with someone who used to call it Mr. Google. But actually, I think Google's so wise, we have to call it Mrs. Google.
Wise old owl Google. Or not.
So Volunteer Cornwall, that's it. That's the Facebook page. And that will have all kind of links in it that you need.
And you're on Instagram as well, aren't you?
We're on Insta, absolutely. And that again, just search for Volunteer Cornwall and we'll come up on that. We're also on Twitter. I think it's at Volunteer Cornwall. And then you can email us. Okay. The easier thing is to go straight through the Facebook, right? Because it will then allow you to go to the forms directly, which you can complete yourself. Or we have got our own website, of course, which is our Volunteer Cornwall website. So it's all the kind of logical, normal things, and you'll find us under Volunteer Cornwall.
And what I'll do is I'll put all of those details in the show notes so people can access those really easily. Well, Ali, I think this has been a really interesting conversation. I hope helpful to some people, and perhaps put some people's minds at rest about all the great work that you're doing. And we'll be back, not quite sure when, perhaps even tomorrow, Ali. Let's see how it goes. We've got to cover number 4 and 5. I'm excited to hear what those might be.
I'm going to keep you in suspense.
Yes, I know. ... Watch this space. And we're going to see how this podcast goes, and we'd be really keen to hear from people on Facebook pages to see what their experiences are. We'll perhaps share some stories, some great news stories, and any issues that you're having that you need extra help with, we can share those as well. And I know, Ali, when we discussed the idea for this, we thought it might be quite fun to share some of our top tips about what it's like being at home for such a long time. If you're working at home, or if you're just kind of running the family home, the things you can do to make the time a little bit easier. I'm trying to eat very carefully and do a bit of exercise every morning. So we can share those top tips as well, which would be fun.
I think one of the top tips that we could be sharing is how to cut your own hair.
I think that's a really good idea.
Because I'm really scared of... I was literally thinking that if I was a hairdresser, I think I would be doing a kind of YouTube channel on how to cut your own hair.
How to cut your fringe. Yeah.
My grey hairs are going to just look so bad at the end of this.
Hairdressers of Cornwall, a shout goes out to you. Show us some lovely content about how we can stay looking okay until we all come and see you at the end of this. Brilliant. So thank you so much, Ali, for your time today. It's been really great to catch up with you. Well done for all the great work you're doing, and we'll speak again very soon.
Thanks, Amanda.
Brilliant. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
This podcast is brought to you by Wave Media Southwest Limited under the Secret Truro brand. Hosted by Amanda Williams with special guest Ali Bowser from Volunteer Cornwall. Audio production and original music by Samuel Williams. Please subscribe or keep an eye on our socials for the next episode.